The assumption is genetics. The grandmother who lived to 94 people say she had good genes. The uncle who died at 62, people say it ran in the family. Every explanation for who lives long and who doesn't has defaulted to the thing nobody can control. A study in human genetics dismantled this. 2,800 pairs of identical twins, sharing 100% of their genetic material, raised in shared households, exposed to identical childhood environments, tracked across their lifetimes. If genes controlled lifespan, identical twins would die within years of each other. They diverge by a decade or more. Genetics determine approximately 20% of how long a human being lives, as Herskind and colleagues established from the Danish twin registry. The remaining 80% responds to something the twins did differently, something practiced, delivered daily. Consider who you recognize in these descriptions. The man who retired at 62 and settled into the recliner. The woman who stopped cooking when her husband died and began eating from packages because cooking for one felt pointless. The couple whose last phone call from a friend was 3 weeks ago and neither noticed until now. The morning that has no reason attached to it, no obligation, no expectation, no structure that requires being awake by a specific hour. None of these feel like medical events. They never appear on a blood panel or trigger a physician's concern. And yet, when researchers mapped the 5 populations on Earth where people live measurably, verifiably longer than everywhere else, the behaviors that separated those populations from the rest were the precise opposites of the life the recliner, the packaged meal, the silent phone, and the purposeless mourning describe. 5 populations on 3 continents: Sardinia, Okinawa, Ikaria, the Nicoya Peninsula, Loma Linda, California, speaking different languages, practicing different religions, eating different foods. When the daily behaviors were mapped, identical patterns appeared, as Buettner identified across 2 decades of cross-cultural fieldwork for the American Journal of Lifestyle Medicine. 7 behaviors, repeated independently by populations with no contact, no shared ancestry, no cultural exchange. When unconnected human populations arrive independently at identical solutions, those solutions are biological requirements, answers to a question the body asks regardless of language, latitude, or century. The body requires specific inputs to maintain itself. The question is what those inputs are answering, because the body is actively evaluating, running a continuous computation, hour by hour, that determines whether to allocate its limited energy toward maintenance or demergency, toward repairing tissue, surveilling for cancer cells, consolidating memory, or toward bracing for a threat the nervous system believes is present. The evaluation runs through a cascade from the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland to the adrenal cortex, the HPA axis, and the program it selects determines, across decades, which organs maintain themselves and which quietly degrade. The longevity populations are populations where that evaluation consistently received the inputs that select maintenance. What those inputs are, and the single question they answer, is where this arrives. Your car to work for 30 years. The elevator because the stairs feel optional. The couch because the floor requires effort. Nobody is watching. Movement as a scheduled obligation added to the day rather than a demand the day itself makes. In Sardinia, shepherds cover mountainous terrain on foot because the sheep are uphill. In Okinawa, families eat on the floor, 6 to 12 complete sit-to-stand transitions daily without calling any of it exercise. The tissue-level physics of movement, cartilage nutrition through varied compression, shear stress driving endothelial function, soleus activation clearing glucose, is established territory across prior discussions. The new territory here is what the body does with the movement signal at the level of the survival evaluation. 2002 adults between 51 and 80 were scored on their ability to lower themselves to the floor and rise without using hands, knees, or forearms, then followed for a median of 6 years. Adults in the lowest scoring category faced 5.44 times higher mortality risk than those in the highest, as Arahuhu and colleagues published from the Clinimex Exercise Medicine Clinic in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology. Each 1-point improvement in the composite score, 21% better survival. What the floor test measures is reserve. The coordinated output of the quadriceps, gluteus, and soleus, producing enough force to lift full body weight from a position modern furniture eliminated. A 2-year-old drops to the floor and springs back without thinking. A 68-year-old braces against the couch. The difference is the accumulated absence of the signal. The body registers that answer as data. Locomotor system operational, or locomotor system declining. The downstream program adjusts accordingly. One answer delivered. Floor to standing transitions, the hip range, the ankle mobility, the motor coordination each demands, are biomechanics described in the floor sitting discussion. Here the framing shifts. The floor test is the body running a survival self-assessment. Can this organism still lower itself to the ground to gather, to build, to tend, and rise again under its own power? A body that registers its own locomotor capacity as declining begins reallocating resources away from the maintenance of systems whose long-term function depends on a body that can still move. Sedentary behavior operates on the opposite end of the axis. Each additional hour of daily sitting beyond approximately 6 hours was associated with increased all-cause mortality, as Kelland and colleagues documented across a pooled analysis of over 1 million adults in the British Medical Journal. The relationship curved sharply above 8 hours, with the steepest increase in those who combined prolonged sitting with low physical activity. 8 hours of stillness sends 8 hours of data to the hypothalamus, reporting that the muscles are dormant, the joints are unloaded, the soleus is silent, and the cardiovascular system is idling at a metabolic rate consistent with an organism that has stopped moving through its environment. If movement is one input the evaluation requires, what else is it reading? But movement and immobility are only the first input the body evaluates. Your lunch, eaten in 10 minutes at a desk, finished before your body knew it had started. The dinner at 9 p.m. Arriving at a liver that locked its processing doors 2 hours ago. The plate that empties because emptying it is the only signal you were taught to recognize as enough. Transit time is the physics problem. Stretch receptors in the stomach wall send a satiety signal through the vagus nerve to the hypothalamus. The integration takes approximately 20 minutes from meal onset. A meal consumed in 10 minutes delivers its full caloric load before the feedback system can respond. You ate past sufficiency before sufficiency could announce itself. A timing mismatch between the speed of eating and the speed of the signal. Compounding begins at the cellular level. Each meal that overshoots the satiety threshold delivers a glucose load demanding an insulin response proportional to the overshoot. The pancreatic beta cells that produce insulin fire harder, more frequently for longer. Across years, the overshoot wears the beta cells the way overuse wears any biological component. Cells that have been working at surge capacity for decades begin losing their ability to respond with the precision the system requires. Your body does not label this as a meal timing problem. It labels it as insulin resistance and addresses the symptom long after the cause has become structural. Okinawans have a phrase, harahachi-bu, eat until 8 parts full, a timing instruction. The meal that ends before the plate empties is the meal that gives the feedback loop time to close. Well, moderate caloric reduction slowed the biological pace of aging by 2 to 3% per year, as Ravison and colleagues demonstrated in the CALERIE trial, the most rigorous human caloric restriction study, testing an average 12% reduction sustained over 2 years, small per year. Compounded across 30 years, the trajectory shifts measurably. Every system, pancreas processing less insulin demand per meal, liver handling less glycogen overflow, endothelium experiencing less chronic glucose pressure, running decade after decade with a lighter load. The CALERIE result demonstrates a molecular aging signal from moderate caloric reduction. Whether that signal translates to measurable years of additional human life has not been confirmed. Composition is the second dimension. Beans appear in every blue zone without coordination. Fava beans in Sardinia, black beans in Costa Rica, soybeans in Okinawa, lentils in Icaria. Legumes deliver protein and fiber while generating lower insulin demand than equivalent animal protein. The arithmetic across a lifetime, less insulin demand per meal, multiplied by 3 meals, multiplied by 3 meals, multiplied by 365 days, multiplied by 50 years, equals a pancreas. Earlier research pointed to resveratrol in red wine. The data moved, current comprehensive evidence finds no safe minimum for alcohol consumption. Sardinian centenarians lived alongside the wine. The molecule is available in higher concentrations in whole grapes and grape juice without alcohol's documented costs to liver function and cancer risk. Two inputs so far: movement and meals, both recognizable, both operating through measurable physics. Neither explains the finding that surprised the researchers more than any dietary pattern or exercise measurement. Purpose, a concept most people file under philosophy, produced a mortality effect larger than most pharmaceutical interventions. How does the body convert something as abstract as having a reason to wake up into a measurable change in the chemistry that determines which organs maintain themselves? Two programs run inside you, one at a time, with a switch between them. One switch, two programs. It has a name, the HPA axis, the cascade from the hypothalamus to the pituitary to the adrenal cortex, determining whether to allocate energy toward emergency or toward repair. You have lived inside both programs. The afternoon when a problem resolved and the shoulders dropped 3 centimeters without conscious effort, that was the switch moving. The week when sleep fragmented and the jaw clenched during tasks that carried no actual threat, that was the switch stuck. Threat chemistry, cortisol elevated, sympathetic nervous system dominant, immune surveillance suppressed, the body pulling resources from long-term maintenance to fund short-term survival, inflammatory baseline rises, tissue repair slows, the telomeres, the protective caps at the ends of every chromosome that shorten with each cell division, shorten faster under sustained cortisol, reducing the number of divisions each cell can perform before it stops replacing itself. Designed for acute danger. The minutes after a predator appears, the program trades tomorrow's maintenance for today's survival, a trade worth making when the threat is real and brief. Extended across months and years, the trade becomes the mechanism of accelerated aging. Every system that requires long-term investment is defunded by a budget redirected to emergency operations that never stand down. Maintenance chemistry. Cortisol baseline low. Parasympathetic nervous system dominant. The vagal brake engaged. Immune surveillance active. Natural killer cells patrolling for abnormal cells at full capacity. Tissue repair running. Inflammatory baseline low. Telomerase, the enzyme that partially restores telomere length, operates at higher activity. Designed for safety. The hours after the threat has passed. The program invests in tomorrow because today is not an emergency. Think of the body's energy budget as a household deciding between renovations and a security system. When the alarms keep firing, from sedentary hours, from purposeless mornings, from weeks without a voice that expected your presence, the renovation budget redirects to security. The house collapses from deferred maintenance. The walls were never repaired because the budget was spent on alarms that never stopped sounding. Or think of it as a factory running 2 shifts. A day shift that builds inventory and a night shift that performs maintenance on the machines. The threat program cancels the maintenance shift. The machines keep running, the product keeps shipping. But the bearings wear, the calibrations drift, and the output quality declines so gradually that nobody notices until a machine fails. The failure looks sudden. The deferred maintenance that caused it accumulated across years of canceled night shifts. Specific maintenance that stops under threat chemistry is identifiable. Natural killer cells reduce their cancer surveillance, a measurable decline in circulating natural killer cell activity under sustained cortisol. Endothelial cells lining every artery receive less nitric oxide, the molecule that keeps them flexible, antithrombotic, and resistant to plaque formation. Osteoblasts that rebuild bone after each loading cycle slow their production. The skeleton loses more mineral per cycle than it replaces. Every system whose function depends on overnight repair, immune surveillance, or inflammatory resolution degrades at the rate the threat program allows, which is very little. And then, all the longevity populations, without coordinating, without knowing each other exist, independently structured their lives to deliver the inputs that select maintenance chemistry. Every habit became a channel through which the body receives a convergent signal: safe. Maintenance, authorized. Both programs run through a single switch in the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus integrates the inputs, cortisol levels, vagal tone, inflammatory markers, muscular activation patterns, metabolic load indicators, and selects the program the total signal implies. The inputs are physiological, not cognitive. The question the hypothalamus answers is whether the organism is in danger or safe. That switch becomes harder to flip back with each decade. The hippocampal neurons that carry the glucocorticoid receptors, the receptors responsible for detecting cortisol and sending the shutdown signal that ends each stress response, atrophy under sustained cortisol exposure. The shutdown signal weakens. The threat program runs longer after each activation. Cortisol baseline drifts upward imperceptibly per year, cumulatively across decades. A 65-year-old whose life delivers fewer safety inputs than it did at 40 is running threat chemistry more often on a switch whose return spring has weakened, in a body whose capacity to repair the resulting damage is simultaneously declining. The compounding is bidirectional. The inputs decrease while the biological cost of their absence increases. What modulates the switch most efficiently is the input nobody expected. Retirement removed the reason to be somewhere by a specific hour. The afternoon that stretches without structure, a vacancy the nervous system interprets as data. The morning that begins with no obligation, no person or project requiring this body to be operational today. The calendar that held appointments last year now holds nothing that would be missed if the body did not wake. Absence is the input. A study in JAMA Network Open, following older American adults prospectively, measured purpose in life using validated psychological instruments and tracked mortality outcomes. Adults with the lowest sense of purpose showed a hazard ratio of 2.43 compared to those with the highest. As Alamujang and colleagues reported, more than double the mortality risk. Buda's cross-cultural data found an association of up to 7 additional years of life expectancy across the blue zone populations, prospectively measured but not yet causally isolated. Whether purpose causes the mortality difference or whether people with better underlying health naturally find more purpose is still being disentangled. The direction is consistent across every dataset. The causal mechanism is plausible but not locked. Here is the mechanism you would not predict. Purpose modulates the HPA axis directly. The hypothalamus integrates the signal that this organism has a function requiring continued operation as a safety input. Adrenal output adjusts downward. Cortisol baseline decreases. The vagal brake, the parasympathetic output that suppresses the threat program, engages more fully. The body shifts toward maintenance chemistry because the nervous system categorizes required to be operational tomorrow as the physiological opposite of expendable. Measurement confirms the shift. Morning cortisol follows a sharper, healthier curve in adults with high purpose. The spike at waking is crisp. The decline through the day is steady. The evening nadir reaches the low point the body needs for melatonin production and sleep architecture to proceed normally. In adults with low purpose, the curve flattens. The morning spike blunts because the adrenal cortex is already producing elevated baseline cortisol from overnight, the system idling in a state of low-grade threat readiness with no specific threat to point to. Evening cortisol remains elevated. Sleep fragments, the overnight repair program, tissue maintenance, immune surveillance, memory consolidation, runs at reduced capacity because the hormonal environment that authorizes it never fully arrives. Ikigai in Okinawa. Plan de vida in Nicoya. Neither translates as hobby or interest, both translate as a reason the morning requires you. The centenarian who tends the garden, who teaches the grandchild, who opens the shop at the same hour every day, the nervous system evaluates whether the organism is needed. Needed equals safe. Safe equals maintenance. Maintenance equals the program that repairs tissue, surveys for cancer cells, consolidates memory, and sustains the organs that threat chemistry would defund. Replacing structure with vacancy does not accelerate aging by choice. The body received the input, no function requiring continued operation, and selected the program that input implies. A measurable endocrine shift, cortisol, vagal tone, inflammatory cytokines, immune cell counts, all moving in the direction the HPA axis selects when the safety signal weakens. That hazard ratio, 2.43 from purpose alone, operating through a pathway connecting a philosophical concept to measurable adrenal output, is why I rebuilt the morning around a structure that asks something of me before the day has a chance to ask nothing. Now, purpose modulates the adrenal output, the cortisol side of the switch. What activates the vagal brake, the parasympathetic side, requires a different kind of input. Stress that followed you from desk to dinner to pillow. Cortisol that never fully cleared because nothing in the day's architecture demanded that it should. A week with no fixed gathering, no regular moment where the nervous system receives safety from other bodies in the same room. Discharge rituals and community rhythm activate a single mechanism, the vagal brake. The vagus nerve's parasympathetic output suppresses the HPA axis, lowers cortisol, reduces heart rate, restores digestive function, and shifts the body from threat to maintenance. The brake requires activation, a deliberate input the nervous system recognizes as the threat has passed. Activation follows specific physics. Slow exhalation stretches the pulmonary stretch receptors, which send vagal afferent signals to the nucleus tractus solitarius in the brainstem. The brainstem categorizes a slow respiratory pattern as consistent with safety because an organism under threat breathes fast and shallow, never slow and deep. Social laughter produces diaphragmatic oscillation that stimulates the vagal pathway through mechanical movement of the abdominal organs. Shared singing activates the recurrent laryngeal branch. The body does not distinguish which pathway delivers the signal. It integrates all of them. Slow breath, diaphragmatic movement, laryngeal vibration, reduced muscular tension. And the vagal brake engages. Blue zone cultures built two kinds of activation into the day's architecture. Daily discharge, Sardinian afternoon aperitivo, Icarian naps, Okinawan tea pauses, Adventist Sabbath observance, brief, regular, structural, daily punctuation activating the parasympathetic shift through social ritual. Weekly rhythm, 258 of 263 centenarians Buettner interviewed, belonged to some form of regular community structure. Denomination did not matter. Frequency did. Attending 4 times per month was associated with 4 to 14 additional years of life expectancy. The range is wide because the effect operates through multiple concurrent pathways. Regular vagal activation from the gathering itself, social safety signaling from belonging to a group that expects your presence, and the cortisol-suppressing effect of oxytocin released during trusted companionship. Sustained disconnection activates threat physiology, cortisol elevated, vagal brake lifted, entropy accelerating in every cortisol-sensitive system, as the loneliness discussion described. Discharge and community deliver the opposite signal through an identical axis. And then, your week with no fixed gathering and your day with no discharge ritual leaves the vagal brake unactivated. The nervous system defaults to the program that operates when the brake is off. Threat chemistry, sustained, accumulating. What would it shift if someone rebuilt the architecture? 5 minutes of deliberate stillness gains a foothold in the evening, a pause with no screen, a walk with no destination. The nervous system reads the input and the brake engages. 5 minutes, structural, daily. Every input delivers data to one evaluation. The hypothalamus does not distinguish between the input arriving through muscular contraction, through vagal afferents from a calibrated meal, through adrenal modulation from purpose, and through social safety signaling from a weekly gathering. It integrates the total signal. The total signal determines which program runs. Receiving 6 of the inputs still produces a signal bias toward maintenance. Receiving only 2, movement and meals, the ones modern life partially preserves, leaves the switch closer to threat than to safety. The threshold is continuous. The hypothalamus integrates moment by moment, and the program running at any instant reflects the cumulative signal arriving from all channels simultaneously. The centenarians received every input. The cumulative signal was overwhelming. Your body asks one question, continuously, without language, through the physiological signals it collects from every system reporting to the hypothalamus. Is my continued presence required? You have felt this switch flip. The last time a phone call from the right person arrived after a difficult week. The chest loosening, the jaw releasing, the sense of the world becoming quieter. That settling is the switch moving from threat to maintenance in real time. The hypothalamus received a safety signal. Another organism confirmed this one's presence matters, and the adrenal output decreased, the vagal brake engaged, and the body shifted program within seconds. One phone call, one input. When the answer across every channel is consistently yes, required, operational, sustainable, safe, needed, the body runs the maintenance program as its default. Tissue repair proceeds, immune surveillance patrols at full capacity, inflammatory baseline remains low. The organs that depend on overnight investment receive it. Decade after decade, The body maintains itself because the total signal authorizes maintenance as the standing program. When the answer across most channels is silence, no movement demanding the locomotor system, no meal rhythm calibrating metabolic load, no purpose requiring continued operation, no community confirming this organism's value, the hypothalamus runs the alternative. Threat chemistry becomes the default. The maintenance that should have been running becomes the exception. The body degrades at the rate the deferred maintenance permits, and across decades, the rate is visible in every organ the threat program defunded. Movement, calibrated meals, purpose, and the voices that confirm this body is needed. Each answer shifts the HPA axis in one direction, from the program that trades tomorrow for today toward the program that invests in tomorrow, because today is not an emergency. Well, the centenarians of Sardinia and Okinawa and Ikaria and Nicaria and Nicoya and Loma Linda were ordinary bodies receiving every answer, delivered through the architecture of lives that demanded movement, calibrated meals by culture, provided purpose through daily obligation, discharged stress through social ritual, and embedded belonging into the weak structure. The maintenance program ran for decades, because every channel confirmed it. The inputs can be built. Blue zones are environments. Singapore was not a blue zone. No centenarian genetics, no ancient traditions, no mountain villages or ancestral diets. A modern city-state that increased life expectancy by approximately 25 years across recent decades through policy. Healthy food subsidized, processed food taxed heavily. Urban infrastructure redesigned to make walking the default transportation mode. Car ownership made expensive, among the most expensive on Earth, ensuring the default was a transit system designed for daily walking. Public housing placed parks and hawker centers within walking distance of every residential block. And the detail connecting most directly to the purpose and social inputs, families living within 500 meters of their elderly parents received a tax break. The government was engineering proximity, rebuilding the social architecture that modern convenience had dissolved. Nothing in the biology changed. The inputs it required were reconstructed through deliberate design. Jeanne Calment in Arles, France, lived 122 years. She walked to the market because her town was built for walking. She ate meals calibrated by a culture that had not yet learned to eat faster than the satiety signal could travel. She had neighbors who would have noticed her absence. She had a reason to get up. She did not find a secret. The life her century gave her kept delivering, without her planning it, the full set of inputs the evaluation requires. Movement built into terrain. Meals paced by culture. Purpose built into a day that still asks something of her. Connection built into a community that would come looking if she did not appear. Modern life removed the inputs. The recliner replaced the walk. The packaged meal replaced the kitchen. The purposeless afternoon replaced the obligation that told the nervous system this organism is still needed. The silent phone replaced the voices that told the hypothalamus this body is safe. Each removal subtracted one channel of safety data. The evaluation shifted, incrementally across years, imperceptibly per day, toward the program that trades tomorrow for today. The inputs changed, and the body, evaluating the total signal, selected the program the signal implied. Yesterday the body asked this question. Tomorrow it will ask again. The answer arrives through what the day contains. The movement it demands, the meals it paces, the purpose it assigns, the voices it delivers, the stillness it permits. Long life is practiced in the answer your body received today.